Welcome to the Ian Bousfield Experience. I'm glad you're here. This series of podcasts are just things that come up in my mind when I'm thinking about playing, when I'm thinking about teaching, and general thoughts about music. There are some things here that I hope you'll find really useful. And don't forget, if you've got any comments or if there's anything you want to discuss further, go to ianbousfield.com. Hello. Well, once again, something on social media has piqued my interest. I saw a post from Alex Manley. Hi, Alex. And it is this. Philosophical question for just intonation in orchestral playing. What's more important? Keeping common tones exactly the same or working to keep all the roots in tune compared to one another? Example. A passage calls for F sharp minor, D major, F sharp minor. Do you keep the F sharp and the A the same for all three chords and just let the folks shifting from C sharp to D find where the note goes, or do you shift all three pitches for both chords? Also, does the answer change if there's one common tone as opposed to two, as in this example? Well, Alex, that's a very good question, but I have to say right out, I read it and first of all I got very confused and then my blood ran somewhat cold. And I thought this would be a very good opportunity to discuss intonation, certainly in an orchestral setting, a little bit. Alex, your question is not stupid. It's a very good and a very current question. I'm, however, going to discuss lots of things around intonation based on this. Before I go any further, I would like to say, again, important background information. In general, the intonation, the general standards of intonation that I've experienced in the USA and in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain, to be absolutely outstanding. And by that I mean they stand out being truly excellent. Really excellent intonation. Now, as some of you may know, I've recently been doing some playing in a trombone quartet that's me and three Americans. And it's an absolute delight. It's like playing with a tuning machine because the intonation is so stable. You know, if you're working with Jim Markey on bass trombone, it is if it's out of tune, it's not going to be him. And it was out of tune, and it was me a lot. But at least I was aware of that situation. That's playing in a trombone ensemble. When we're playing in an orchestra, the way we orientate ourselves to things is slightly different. So let's just go back to Alex's question now, as to whether we adjust if the chord changes. Well, yes, Alex, yes, we do. In my opinion, it's quite often you'll be sitting on the same note, the chord changes around you, and you're going to be moving to adjust to the chord. However, what interests me in this is your post, although very logical, is very cognitive. And there are two ways we can approach almost everything in music. One is cognitively and the other is intuitively. And any of you who know me even a little bit will know that I'm going to go down the intuitive route. Yes, we do move around depending. We're not going to just hold the same note and people shift around us. I'm going to discuss this in bigger detail later. But first of all, I'd like to go back to that issue of the fantastic intonation in America and in the UK. In many ways, it surprises me that the intonation in the UK in the trombone world is so good. Now, hear me out on this, guys. Because we most of us grew up playing in brass bands. And, the musical world where euphonium players play Fs, E naturals, E flats, concert pitch, of course, a quarter tone sharp. Certainly they did when I was a kid. And but we knew when we left the brass band, and we played in tune with them. If the euphoniums went high, we went high, and they did go high, very high, and the baritones. if they ever played that high. And but then we knew when we went into a normal orchestral setting that we had to correct those. We all know what the correction is. But what puzzles me is that in Spain and in Italy, they have the same kind of tradition of playing in wind bands with euphonium players. And it drives me crazy that they haven't managed to fix that. It drives me crazy with students that harmonic is always so high. Now, Joe Alessi has a very interesting theory on this, in that it's the fact that we orientate ourselves to the position of the bell with our eye, that we assume the fourth position is directly under the bell, which of course on most trombones is not. It's quite a bit further down than that. And he indeed went so far as to have a trombone made where the bell is pointing completely in the wrong direction. You can't see it. So the only thing you're looking at is the slide. So you get a different way of orientating the intonation, which is a very interesting theory. Let's just a couple of background things on this. In my opinion, almost nobody has bad intonation. And again, hear me out on this. About once every 5 years, I hear someone who has what we call in England cloth ears. They can't hear which way is up or down. When somebody else plays out of tune, we can always hear it, and we can always hear whether it's up or down or by how much it's up or down. And I often like to do, when I'm working with someone who's a bit concerned about their intonation, or I'm concerned with their intonation, I get someone else to play, or I deliberately play certain notes too high or too low. They notice it immediately, but we don't notice it ourselves when we play out of tune. So please be reassured that you don't have bad intonation. You just got used to playing some notes in the wrong place. We all do. And that's why we need friends and colleagues. Somebody say, hey, you're a little bit too high, you're a little bit too low, or whatever. Now, when I first joined the London Symphony Orchestra, I had a colleague who said, you must never discuss someone's performance in bed, the quality of their driving of a car, or their intonation, because if you do, you've got a guaranteed fight on your hand. And because most people are sensitive, apparently, about those three subjects. And I think that's a bit sad. And despite that, we had a very, very positive and good environment in the London Symphony where we could really openly discuss everything. And I, for one, am always incredibly grateful if someone says, you see that E flat, you're too high. You see that C natural, you're too low. Watch out. Actually, no one ever told me I was too low. And until recently, a couple of times I've been too low recently, greatly to my delight. And so we had this very open and positive exchange on all manner of things, including intonation. And so we need friends. We need people to listen to us. And we need to play for people because we get accustomed to playing a note in the wrong place. I think it kind of is like this. Our quality control manager that sits on our shoulder says, Philip, Bob, whatever your name is, that B is too high. And so you play it again, and the quality control manager says, no, I've just told you, the B is too high. And the third time it happens, the quality control manager says, you know what, if you want to play that B too high, I'm going for a beer. I don't care. I'm not telling you anymore. And we get used to it. But I have a particular problem, a lot of people do, with descending legato intervals. If you're descending a fifth, because of the technicalities of the way we're going to move our embouchure, we finish up going too low, so the interval is too big. And that's where we need people to help us to correct that. I think in an orchestral setting, one of the biggest issues that I've found is the bass trombone and the tuba feeling that it is their role to set the fundament of the chord. And of course, there's some justification in this, of course, because they are close to the double bass section, and there is some deal of relevance to the unification of those pitches. However, it tends to split the trombone section in half. You've got the tuba and bass trombone section, and you've got the tenor trombones. And they get pulled apart because the bottom half of the section stays where they are, and the top part of the section gets pulled more in the direction of the trumpets and the horns. Which leads me on to how, for me, the only way intonation in a brass section can work, and that is on a basic hierarchical system. As first trombone in an orchestra, if it was not together with the trumpet, with the first trumpet, it was my fault. If it was out of tune with the first trumpet, it was my fault. These guys have got difficult instruments to play, and they've got difficult parts to play. So wherever the trumpet goes, we go. Now, as I said, ultimately, if you think that, the person playing first trumpet is occasionally a little bit too high or too low, they're usually grateful to be told that, but not in the heat of the moment. And you have to choose your words carefully. Most first trumpet players, I have to say, particularly in Vienna, were incredibly grateful to be, suggested to them that, they bin ich zu hoch, am I too high, And the answer, maybe a little. Yes, I am capable of diplomacy, was given sometimes. But I was also grateful to have that back. You need to have that exchange. So we have this hierarchy. The first trumpet is trying to fit in, probably, if you're doing a Richard Strauss tone poem or whatever, those big trumpet solos or whatever, what we perceive as being solos, they're not actually, because they're in unison with the first violins. But they're locking into the first violins, or they're locking into the first horn or the first oboe. We can't go in our own direction. As first trombone, you have to go with them. And the rest of the trombone section then has to attach themselves to what the first trombone player is doing. It's not about superiority or seniority. It's about the only way it can work. It's a functional way of doing it. And now for the big intonation elephant in the room. The lowering of thirds and the raising of fifths. Do I do that? Well, I guess I do, yeah. I guess I probably do. I don't know I'm doing it. I just find the right place for the note. When I reverse engineer it, I guess I can work out that the third is a bit lower and the fifth is a bit higher. I just find the right sound. And I have a bit of a problem with doing that mechanically, with analysing the chords. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. When I'm playing a certain note in a chord, I don't always know which part of the chord it is. Sorry, big admission. There you go. But I know which place that note sounds the best, where the chord really rings and hums. Now, I'm not stupid. I could work it out. I just don't decide to approach it that way. I decide to approach it intuitively rather than cognitively. Now, a while ago, quite a while ago, I was a bit naughty when I was in Vienna because we received the parts. We played the Bruckner Fourth Symphony, and we received the parts from one of the American Big Five orchestras. And every note, and I mean every note, had an arrow going up, down, or a zero. And took me an hour and a half, but I changed them all. Because I think, for me, once I personally started doing that, I'm lost. I've lost the naturalness of the music. And I guess a lot of people are going to have a different opinion to that, but and I'm sure that the people sound very, very good doing that. I'll tell you why I have a bit of an issue with it. There was a conductor, again, went to the same orchestra and said, "Trombones, I can hear what you're doing, but please would you mind not doing it?" And his reasoning being that the human ear picks up the highest note of a chord as somewhat of a melody line. And very strange if the melody line is going up and down and changing, because solo intonation, melodic intonation, is different to chordal intonation. Now it depends what you believe. There's a theory out there, quite a radical one, that up until 1850, 1860, there were no real melodies. They were just ramifications of the chord sequence, and that they just happened to be the highest note of the chord. I don't believe that. I'm what we call in England a tunesmith. I love melodies. Now, melodic intonation is different to chordal. I once played a solo concert, and a very prominent horn teacher came to me and said, "Oh, I bet the violins in your orchestra love what you do because you play their intonation." Now, when you're playing solo intonation, semitones, half steps, tend to be narrower. They tend to be quite small. In fact, I did an audition once with the Vienna Philharmonicals on the panel, and the principal viola player said to me, and it would have to be the principal viola, wouldn't it, of course, said, the best players, the soloists, they play small half steps, they play small semitones. So I'm looking for someone who plays small semitones. Whoever does that will win the job. Welcome to orchestras, folks. So anyway, the point I make, there are a couple of points. One is the obvious one that I've just made, that the highest note of the chord, the melody line, is going to be bouncing all over the place, which is going to sound strange. And the other thing is that we're very often accompanying, let's say, an oboe solo or the violins, wherever a D sharp is, wherever a B flat is. If I'm playing in unison with the melody, I'm not dropping the third or raising the fifth to fit in with what's going on underneath me. If there's to be any adjustment, the adjustment has to fit underneath that note. If there's a unison chord with the melody, it has to be in tune with the melody. That's quite logical, right? That makes sense. You can't have a trombone section playing at a different intonation to the woodwinds. Whether they're right or wrong makes no difference. We have to play with them. So that's why, trombone sections love trying things. Oh, shall we just get together and try these chords, in the break of a rehearsal? And it's all very nice and lovely. It's great. It's great for togetherness and, getting a good sound and working out the relation of intonation to each other. But I think we need to understand, and I said this so often, I said, guys, this is great, but tonight, if the first horn player's gone too high or the first oboe player's in a different intonation, I'm sorry, I can't play with you. I have to go with that. And you have to latch on to what I'm doing. And again, it's not an ego thing. It's just like, how else is it going to work? Now, I can hear these trombone players saying, yeah, that's because we're going to set the intonation. If it's wrong, no. There is no right and wrong in intonation. It's either in tune or it's not. And it's usually a good thing, a positive thing, to assume that you're wrong. That's something that I've found very much over the years. Now, I'm going to do quite a big video podcast on intonation in a section as to how we do it, because there's lots of things. Intonation is very rarely intonation, it's balance or articulation or sound concepts. But anyway, that's a story for another day. These feelings of flattening the third and raising the fifth. I reckon I've played, like I said, I've played quite a lot of very sharp thirds and enjoyed it, because particularly in Verdi, sounding like you got your fingers in the electric current is quite a startling effect sometimes. So there are some of my thoughts on intonation. Now, I know not everyone's going to agree with it, but I think it's now time to go back to the good old intonation saying of, nobody is right, nobody is wrong. It's either in tune or it's not. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If there are any issues that you found particularly interesting, don't forget to contact me, and always go to ianbousfield.com for lots more interesting stuff.